Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to this short conversation about The Long Coast, the incredible new film directed and written and edited by Ian Cheney, who's with us here tonight. I'm hopeful that you all had a chance to watch it these last few days and feel as inspired by it as I do. It's unbelievable to see how many people have registered and how many people are tuning in tonight and keep logging in. It's great to have you all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Natalie Springuel, and I am on the Marine Extension team with the University of Maine Sea Grant Program, and I'm thrilled to be the moderator tonight for this session. Before we launch, I wanted to share just a couple quick housekeeping notes, which seems silly considering how far into using Zoom we all are, but just in case, just so you all know, this session is being recorded, and it's also streaming live on Facebook, on the Maine Island Trail Association's Facebook live stream. Second, you probably have noticed that you've all been muted and your video is turned off, and it's going to stay that way because we really want to focus all our attention on our panelists, who will turn their cameras on in just a couple minutes. We will be answering audience questions in the second half of the program, and I invite you to write them in the Q&A function of your Zoom window, which you can find on the bottom in your sort of settings screen. That's pretty much all the logistics I think that we're going to cover tonight. Feel free to start entering some questions into that Q&A whenever they occur to you. So when our three sponsors who are on your screen invited me to moderate this session, I was really thrilled. I've had the incredible good fortune of having my life and my work oriented towards the Gulf of Maine for more than 30 years. And in that time, the Maine Island Trail Association, the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, and the Island Institute have all been leaders in the realms of fisheries, recreational boating, and community development. And having these three organizations proactively work together to explore the complicated issues we face on our working waterfront, it gives me hope for the future. And I want to thank all three of them for hosting this event. So if you, our audience members, are here tonight, it's probably because, like the characters featured in the film, and like all our panelists, you probably have a connection to the Maine coast and its people that runs pretty deep. Maybe you work these waters, maybe you grow oysters, maybe you harvest clams or haul lobster traps, maybe you live here or visit in the summer, maybe you sail or kayak or row your pea pod around the Maine Islands. Whatever all our connections to this place might be, we understand the draw of the ocean. When Jean Simmons, the 84-year-old woman lobsterman featured in the film, said that she screams at just the happiness to be back on the water again, I think we all get it. We feel it too. This film speaks to all of us who love the Maine coast and to our collective desire to protect everything about it that we hold so sacred. So let's start by getting everyone in the mood of the film by playing the trailer, and then we'll jump into our conversation. Madison's just going to take a second to fire up the trailer, and while she's doing that, I'll just express a thank you to all the behind the scenes folks who are helping pull together all the bits.
I love working on the ocean.
That's the way you live down here.
I would take my boat out after I launched it in the spring, and I'd just scream. Just the happiness to be back on the water again. Lobstering's changing. I dreamed about putting my traps in the water, but they're in strange places.
The ocean is warming, the ocean is rising.
A lot of the wild product is not there like it used to be.
I fished here for almost 40 years, and then I kind of changed course.
There it goes!
very few communities get the opportunity to reinvent themselves.
We need technology because we don't know how long Mother Nature's going to keep providing stuff for us.
You have one fishery that jumps up, and then you have another fishery that kind of falls. This is just another way to stay on the ocean.
Thank you for the trailer. I hope everybody enjoyed that, and it inspired all sorts of thinking about the full film. So I know that each of our panelists feel a profound connection to the Maine coast and to the people and issues presented in the film, and I'm excited to introduce them and to start our conversations. So tonight we're joined, and bit by bit, our panelists are going to start turning on their cameras so you can see who we've got here. We are joined by Ian Cheney, who's the director, writer, and editor of our feature film. We're joined by Susie Arnold, who's the marine scientist at the Island Institute, by Brian Marcaurelle, the program director at the Maine Island Trail Association, by Ben Martens, the executive director of the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, and last but certainly not least, Krista Tripp, who's a lobsterwoman, an Elver harvester, and the owner of Aphrodite Oyster, and also was featured in the film. So it's really great, especially to have you here, Krista. Before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge one thing, and that's that there is a lot going on in Maine waters right now. A lot of issues are triggering intense conversations about the future of this coast. Things like how whales do or don't interact with fishing gear, things like where wind turbines should or should not be installed in the Gulf of Maine. These conversations are very important, and they absolutely should be explored and discussed. And there are many ways for all of you, our audience members, to engage in these conversations, and we're happy, any of us on the panel, to help you make those connections. But tonight is about the long coast and the themes raised in the film, the poetry, the image, and the sounds and the voices of the people who make their living on this long coast that we call Maine. So let's get started with our questions for the panelists. You guys ready? Awesome. Yes. Great. So our first one is really easy. What were your reactions to the film? What did you love about it? What did it make you think about or feel? And why don't we start with Brian from the Maine Island Trail Association?
Sure. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you for moderating this event. When we were planning it, we were trying to think of who we might ask to moderate it, and your name was tops on the list, so we really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, the film was gorgeous, really stunning, and I personally really appreciated the focus on the breadth and variety of the fishing industry. I learned a lot just by listening to the individuals in the film and by observing what was going on in the background. It was like a window into parts of the fishing industry that are largely invisible to those of us who aren't fishermen, which is one reason why I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to share this film with the MITA community. Most of our members are recreational boaters or are connected to the coast in some way that other than fishing. And so I hope that this film helps others understand the working waterfront folks that we see out on the water all the time a little bit better, like it did for me. And I'll just sort of say that as one final thought, that Ian, I loved your choice of bookending the film with the ferry ride, because for me, it was kind of like an out and back journey into the lives of some of these people that work on the coast.
Great, thank you, Brian. Let's go with Ben next from Maine Coast Fishermen's Association.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that for me, I'm very fortunate that I get to work with fishermen day to day and get to see the different parts of their lives. And this was just a beautiful view into another part of the world, another part of the coast that we were able to share. And I'm so glad that so many people have been able to experience this film. I hope that more are able to watch it, because what we have in Maine is just such a special environment, such a special community, such a special place. And it's often overshadowed in the rush. And I loved the slow pace of this film and how it gave the viewer the opportunity to soak it in. And I know that, when our organization talks about making films or trying to share our stories, we work with people and they're like, you've got 2.5 minutes to get across what you want to say. Otherwise, people are going to lose attention. And so you have to hit sound bites. You have to like push and move and keep attention on and eyeballs on. And I just found it very refreshing to be able to take a deep breath and immerse myself into the waters and into the people along the coast in this. So, it was just kind of a joy to put on and watch in a deep breath of time.
Nice. Thank you, Ben. Let's go with Susie next from the Island Institute.
Thanks, Natalie, and I'm honored to be on the panel. I just wanted to thank all of the attendees for their friendly nature and telling us where you're tuning in from. That was nice to open up the hour. So I really appreciated the raw portrait of the food system, kind of like I had never seen it before, even though I also work closely with fishermen and aquaculturists. I also really appreciated and could relate to the extreme love of the ocean that was emitted from every character. Also, what really came through for me was the people's love of freedom and being self-employed. That really came through to me. I think those were the big themes that haven't been hit on so far. So yeah, I thought that it was the passion there, and the slow pace, like Ben said, was really unlike any film of the Maine coast I've seen before.
Great. Thank you, Susie. Why don't we go to Krista next? And Krista, you have the distinction on our panel tonight to be a panelist who is also in the film. So it would be great to hear what your reflections are on the film and how your experience was to be one of the featured people.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for letting me attend. It's definitely an honor to be here. And I think the film was put together beautifully. And I myself, as a fisherwoman, lobsterwoman, and harvester, it was just really wonderful to see everyone else who was featured on the film's love for the ocean and for the water and what they do. And it just, with all of the viewers that I've seen, it is really great to see that, other people also share that interest and love for the ocean in viewing this film. So.
Great. Thank you, Krista. And Ian, the person behind the creation of the film, what are some of your thoughts just in hearing what these guys are saying and how that might sort of correlate with what you were hoping to achieve in putting together the film?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate everyone being here and really fun to be on this panel with you guys. The Robin Metcalf and I, who kind of conceived of this film together, really wanted to go into a space, the coastal fisheries ecosystem, kind of openly and honestly, a space that we hadn't spent much time in or knew much about, and then reflect that experience back as honestly as we could to the audience, in a way that, as I think a few of you touched on, and Ben, you touched on, in a way that kind of opened up space and provide, kind of sparked conversation and reflection. A lot of filmmaking these days can be fairly polarizing or sort of a whose side are you on treatment of topics. And I think the coast and the sea and the way we relate to it is a space that deserves much more than that, and deserves space for nuance and looking at things from different perspectives. So, it's beautiful. We in a way we set out, we didn't really want to make a kind of a postcard film, like weren't looking to make a Maine tourism advertisement. But the beauty of the coast is inescapable. Just as I think the love of the ocean among people who work on it is inescapable.
Thanks. I want to build a little bit on that love of the ocean, because I think for folks, it's hard to know where our audience members all come from. I'm going to suspect our audience members are very diverse. I'm seeing things like West Virginia and other places far away. I'm not really able to look at the chat too closely, but I think we have diverse folks. And I think that when people maybe don't live on the coast of Maine or aren't connected to the fishing or the aquaculture industry, they have sort of in their minds maybe stereotypes about what that industry is all about. And I think what I'm hearing from you guys say, and I felt it too, was the passion that people who work on the coast really feel for this place and the commitment to stewarding this place. And I just wanted to hear you guys reflect on that a little bit, about sort of what your experiences are, either as a fisherman in Krista's case, or any one of you who have spent time here or worked with fishermen, about sort of the ethic of care for this place that is part of the culture and the fabric. Who would like?
I won't be shy. I'll jump in.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
So, you know, I'm originally from New Hampshire. I'm not from Maine, and I'm from the woods. And my parents are from Jersey and Connecticut, right? And so my sense of place is one where, like, I was tied to a spot for a period of time, and then I moved, and I'm now tied to this spot. And then I talked to the fishermen that I work with, and the president of my board is a 10th generation fisherman from Chebeague Island. His son is going to be the 11th generation. Other members of my board are 4th and 5th generation fishermen. And they've grown up and lived, and the generations have lived in these same places. And so when you think about, you know, what it means to look at the ocean and see just blue, like they look out on the ocean and they see their parents and their grandparents, they see fishing holes. It's not just a flat calm. There's stories with every piece of the coast that they know so well. And every one of these people is an expert in their own little space of the ocean in a way that, like, I could never be. And it's always amazing. Like we were sitting down with one of the fishermen to talk about some science that he was looking at and some of his catch. And we were going through it, and he opened up a book and he said, oh, hey, let me show you what my grandfather caught in these same spaces, right? And so that sense of place and like what comes with like the stewardship of that place, and whether it's the fisheries or the community, is just really inspiring. And one of the things that, you know, makes my work just so joyous and, you know, inspiring for me to continue to work on and do every day. So.
Great, thanks, Ben. Feel free to jump in, somebody from the panel.
For myself, my family, I am actually a 3rd generation. My grandfather was a lobsterman. Before that, he had a fish ware. My dad, my uncle, my brother, we all grew up on the ocean here where I live in South Thomaston, Maine. And we were raised knowing how important it was to take care of our oceans, because that's how we make a living. So, I mean, I fell in love with the ocean as a child, going out to haul with my dad, you know, seeing the sunrise, the sunset. It was just simply amazing. So, yeah, I was raised myself to deeply care for the ocean, and definitely, you know, take care of it in any way that we can. So hence the reason I kind of went into aquaculture after learning about oysters and how they filter the water and they clean their environment. It was really awesome to learn that. So for myself, as a lobsterman, it is great to kind of diversify into an industry that I know that I'm helping save the environment.
Just wanted to build off that with a couple of things. We just hosted one of my favorite events of the year at the Island Institute called Fishermen's Climate Roundtables. Ben's been to a couple of them. Krista, I don't think you've ever been, but there's a group of fishermen. It's the 15th annual year of Fishermen's Climate Roundtables, and a group of fishermen, 10 to 15 fishermen come every year, and then there's maybe 10 to 15 more that come occasionally. But it's my favorite event of the year because it's a chance for me to sit down with these fishermen, and most of them are old timers, and they've had their career on the water for 40 or 50 years. And it's a chance for me to listen to the changes that they've seen over their career, and talk about the changes that they're seeing on the water and different things that are showing up in their traps that didn't show up even 10 or 20 years ago. And when we talk about, or I guess it's one thing to talk about the conservation ethic of fishermen. And I think that there's some really practical examples of why it is important and how it actually works. In that, if you look at the lobster fishery and you look at the harvester induced conservation measures that have been put in place by the industry themselves, like V-notching or instating the minimum and maximum sizes for that industry, those conservation measures that were put in place by the fishermen themselves, they have helped to make the industry as profitable and successful and sustainable as it is today. And there's even published science in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a report done by a guy named Arnold from the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, showing that had they not put in those conservation measures, they would be a lot more vulnerable to climate change today. And it is because of those measures that they are as successful as they are today. So I think that's a great testament to the conservation ethic that we've been talking about.
Great, thank you, Susie. Brian or Ian, do you want to add anything?
I'll just quickly add that, you know, I feel like that innate environmentalism in fishermen is easy to overlook, and it's something that I'm really glad that the film shed some light on. From the opening interview with Steve Taylor, I think, the clammer, who was talking about harvesting clams in the early morning and just being in awe of his surroundings with birds singing and the sun rising and just being at peace in nature. And that feels to me like a really great opportunity for recreational boaters who also care about the ocean and people that work on the water who care about the ocean to kind of work together more closely.
Great. Ian, I'm going to sort of twist the same question for you in terms of when you were interviewing all these folks and spending time with them out on their boats and on the shores and on the wharfs and all the places that you spent time on. What was sort of surprising or, on the opposite, sort of affirming for what you were hearing and what you were seeing when you were out?
I found myself at some point thinking a lot about whether in the midst of all of the changes that befall a coastline like this, from climate to COVID and, you know, kind of everything in between, whether folks are hopeful or despairing, you know, whether you have hope or despair, and that's maybe abstract in some sense, but it kind of became a guiding question for me to sort of feel out where people were on that spectrum. And I think I learned to see that something that maybe should have been obvious to me all along, which is that hope takes a lot of different forms. And I think we came to see it in resilience and adaptation, and in that kind of persistent love of working on the sea that can take a lot of different forms. So I think in some sense, the experience of making the film for me was kind of learning to see in a new way. And I hope some of that comes through for viewers too.
Yeah, thank you. The experience of seeing makes me think of fishermen and fish farmers who are out on the water all day, every day, rain, shine, you know, whatever the situation is in terms of the weather, and the incredible, the knowledge that they have was really sort of reflected in the film. And Susie, for example, you just mentioned, you know, that fishermen in your climate roundtables are talking about what are they seeing in their traps now compared to what they saw 15 years ago. What are you guys hearing from fishermen, either Ian through the process of the interviews and the filming, or Krista in your own experience, or the or other three panels? What are you hearing about from people who spend their time on the water about what's changing, what's different now than 10, 15 years ago in terms of the ocean itself? I'm going to call on one of you. Susie, go for it.
Sure. I think a lot is changing. I mean, I think you hit on it when you said what's showing up in traps. Well, there's a lot more lobsters showing up in traps these days than there were 10 or 15 years ago. Going back to the 15 years ago when we started the climate roundtables, the fishermen were astounded to be catching 60 to 70 million pounds. Now, over the last 10 years, we're upwards to, I think it's, help me out here, guys. I think it's closer to like 130 million pounds. So what we've seen is an extreme increase in the number of lobsters that we're catching. And there are several reasons for this. Some have to do with a lack of groundfish predators. A lot has to do with warming waters. That's something that we talk about a lot at climate roundtables because a lot of the fishermen have temperature sensors in their traps. So they participate in this program called EMOLT that's led by Woods Hole. And essentially they're not guessing that the water is increasing because they can see the data in their own traps over the last 15 years. So, Krista, I think you could talk about invasive species from fouling your gear from your lobster traps to your oyster bags. Ben could probably talk about new species that are more prevalent in terms of groundfish and other fin fish. So I'll stop there, but I think this we could talk a whole day about this topic.
Yeah, Susie, definitely. I've definitely seen an increase in lobsters, and that is because lobstermen, have put these sustainability measures into place. So, I mean, we've always kind of been stewards of the ocean and trying to, take care of our fisheries in every single way possible. But as far as, global warming, climate change, the temperatures, waters increasing, it has, there's nothing that we can really do about that. Again, another reason I kind of went into oyster farming. But I'm definitely seeing a lot more fouling, a lot more green crabs in the river due to that.
Yeah, so the fishermen that I work with catch a lot of different species throughout the course of their year. And so they'll catch lobster part of the year, groundfish. So those are things like cod and haddock and flounders, and then scallops and menhaden and herring. So, what we're seeing is nothing's the same, right? There's a lot more fluctuations. When you would expect to see something coming in, it doesn't show up. And when you're not expecting to see something, it does show up. And so, it's very easy to kind of show climate change through a linear chart in terms of rising ocean temperatures or land temperatures. But in reality, there are pretty dramatic swings in any given year between the ocean temperature, and fish are very dependent upon temperature of water, and they're following the prey around. And so there's a lot of disturbance. And so a lot of fishermen that we work with, they used to go by their log books and they'd be like, this is when I move my traps. This is when I would go into this area to catch flounders or monkfish. And now they're like, I have to throw them out. Like what I used to run by when it came to the time of year is no longer the current standard. That doesn't mean that the fish are gone. It doesn't mean that the lobsters have gone away. It means that things are showing up at different times. And that's impacting our science, because a lot of our science is done based upon time series and where tows are done at different times of year. And so right now, the easiest way to talk about climate change is massive disruption to normal operations on fishing vessels. And we do have invasive species. We have some species that are, they've always been around, like dogfish, but their population is exploding. And so we have a lot of fishermen that are trying to pivot, and there's opportunities that come with that. Scallops is one of those opportunities as well. We've had some amazing settlements of scallops in the Gulf of Maine that we haven't had for 30 plus years. And that creates opportunity for fishermen as well. And lobster is one of those opportunities too. With warming temperatures, we had lobsters that, you know, kind of blossomed and bloomed along our coast in a very real way. And so climate change is scary, and, you know, it does feel as though it's not always something that we can deal with. But I always try and tell people, you know, the simplest thing that you can all do individually when it comes to climate change is start eating better. And one of those things that you can eat is seafood, because it's very low carbon footprint compared to almost any other protein source that you can imagine. And so it's really, really valuable to remember that, like, every one of us can be doing small things to help impact the climate. We can do big things too, but some of those small things can also have a resounding impact on our local communities, like eating, you know, local seafood and being conscious about who you're supporting and what you're doing with your time and energy and money.
Great, thank you. I want to correlate a little bit about what you guys are saying to something that Krista, you talked about in the film, where you talked about, you know, you might target one fishery for a while, and then that maybe is not as lucrative for a while, and then switching to a different fishery, and your own story about now getting into oyster farming. And it just really sort of exemplifies that the resilience and the innovation that fishermen really have to sort of live by. And so I wondered, Krista, if you could share a little bit more about your own story with having to switch around a little bit.
Yeah. Like I mentioned in the film, it's always kind of been this way. I mean, lobsters, they'll rise and fall due to the predators that are around eating lobsters. And that's with any other kind of industry, you know, fish, all kinds of different stuff. So I learned a long time ago from my grandfather, when he owned a fishware and the fish stock started to decline, that, you know, you go into another fishery in order to, you know, maintain your living on the water, and, you know, to keep Maine's working waterfront alive here. So I kind of thought really long and hard about that, and decided that, you know, it would be smart to, you know, go into something else and not put all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. Yeah, that's why I went into oyster farming. I just wanted to stay on the water. You know, love the ocean.
Great. So I see that we have a bunch of questions, and we're sort of consolidating them. There's probably more than we can actually answer, but we'll get to them in a couple minutes. But before we get to the questions, I wanted to ask a question of our panelists in the realm of sharing the coast. Since this event is co-sponsored by 3 organizations that share the coast, but represent sort of different interest areas. And I know that you guys collaborate a lot on various topics, but we've got, you know, recreational boating represented on our panel, and we've got fisheries represented on our panel, and we've got community development. So it's kind of wide and diverse, which is exciting. And so I just wondered if you guys could reflect a little bit on the diversity of the coast and how we best share it going forward. Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I love that question, Natalie, because it's something Maida's thinking a lot about these days. You know, there's a funny dynamic between recreational boaters and the working waterfront. It's sort of like we share the same waters, we use the same launch ramps and docks and wharfs and stuff, but there's still a disconnect between them a lot of times. I mean, we're neighborly and we're pleasant and most of the time, but there are tensions as well. And often that stems from a lack of awareness or lack of understanding or some outdated perceptions. But one of the things that Maida's really trying to focus on is ways that we can kind of bridge that divide and kind of utilize this shared love of the coast that we've been talking about tonight as a springboard for working together more and collaborating. And in the sort of thinking about the immediate, the present, one of the consequences of COVID was that there was a whole bunch of new outdoor recreationists in the world, including people, you know, getting into boating for the first time or getting back into boating after not having been on the water for a long time. And so one of the things that MITA is trying to do is really tailor our communications to folks that maybe aren't as familiar with good etiquette for, you know, using launch ramps or being on the water or rules of the road and that sort of thing, because it feels like that's something that's a role that MITA could play to try to make sure that the recreational boating community is doing its part to be a good neighbor to the working waterfront.
Nice. This sort of correlates with one of the questions in that are coming in. So I'm gonna start shooting some questions to you guys that the folks are posting in the Q&A and in the chat. So this one sort of speaks to this a little bit. So this film captured this moment in time on this coast with beauty and poignancy. Do you feel that you've captured a disappearing time? Is there hope that the coast can continue to be so many things to so many people?
When I let Ian take a swing at that, I'm happy to follow up on it. But Ian was the guy who captured the moment.
Yeah, I think we did want to. I mean, the film ends on a slightly wistful note, and I think that's meant to flag kind of what the question flags, which is that in a way, any moment, of course, is fleeting. So any portrait is going to be fairly ephemeral, and that's okay. Like that, you know, change defines a coast, and I came to, I don't know, sort of find peace with that at some point during the filming, and even kind of find hope within that. That a place can change and still retain its past and still build on its past. It's not utter annihilation and destruction and the wiping away of memories. And you know, one of the reasons we make films and write sea shanties and all the other ways of sort of storing memories of a place are precisely to keep those traditions alive. And so the coast of the past stays alive in a lot of different ways that may not feel obvious all the time. So that doesn't really answer the question, but I think those are my reflections on the question.
Yeah, I actually think it does answer the question, because it captured a moment in time, and everything's going to be different in the future. Right now, we are under a seismic change taking place within our coastal communities and the ecosystem. Not only do we have climate change, but we've got a massive influx of new residents moving into coastal Maine because of the ability to work remotely. We have new friends and new neighbors that are moving into this space, and not all those people are ready for the Maine life when it comes to loud boats and stinky bait and everything else that goes along with the working waterfront community. So to get back to Natalie's question that she asked Brian, like, we need communication, and we need transparency, and we need friendship and bridge building between all of these different communities. And that's how we hold on to our way of life, is by not creating the people who are from here and from away, but inviting those who are from away into our community so that they embrace it and love it and enjoy it and are happy to smell that bait in the morning, because it means that their community is strong and healthy and holding on to something that makes it such a special place. But it does mean that we have to work really hard to hold on to the pieces that we care about and work together to change the things that need changing. And so I'm extremely optimistic about the future of Maine's fishing communities and Maine's fisheries, but it's going to take a lot of investment and work and compassion to get there, because it's not going to be the same. and it can't be the same because right now it isn't working for everybody. And we need to open up our arms and make it work a little bit better and embrace change. One of the projects that our organization has been heavily invested in over the past few years is protecting working waterfront and talking about working waterfront. And when we start sitting down with people about working waterfront, they often like the idea of putting working waterfront in amber and not letting it change, right? And when I talk about working waterfront, I'm not talking about like leaving it alone so that those pieces of wood can rot and fall into the ocean when we're done with it. But I want innovation, I want opportunity coming across those docks. And so I think that that's how like we have to like really put this needle through the head of a pin on trying to figure out how we can make it work for our current way of life and then welcome the future at the same time.
All right. So let's, I want to thank everyone for all your questions. There's some really great questions coming in here. Let's see, here's the next one. The love of the self-sufficient life of making one's life on the ocean conflicts with the need for collective solutions to avoid the tragedy of the commons. Is that true or not so much? How do you build more capacity for and trust in collective measures to steward the fisheries? I think this question actually speaks a lot to what Ben was just talking about. Susie, any thoughts on that question? How to build more capacity for and trust in collective measures to steward the fisheries?
I mean, I think that there's definitely room for both on the Maine coast. I mean, the lobster industry is a great example of successes and challenges, I guess, faced by owner operators. I mean, you have great successful models of lobster cooperatives along the coast where they're still owner operated businesses, but they have co-ops. I hear a lot of fear about industrialized aquaculture coming to the Maine coast, vertically integrated companies. That being said, we have some vertically integrated companies already on the Maine coast that are great contributors to the marine economy and employ more people than an owner operated business could employ. So I think that, you know, like Ben was saying, I think it's really important to build bridges and make friendships and come with open arms and have these hard conversations that that we need to have. But I definitely think that there's room for both.
Great. Thank you. A couple of questions for Ian. These are probably a little bit easier than some of these bigger philosophical questions. One is, where did the poems come from? And the second one is, are there any places that you spent time in that unfortunately had to be left out of the film in the end?
Sure. Yeah, those are great. I wrote the poems, and there are a number of scenes that somehow didn't fit in this version of the film, but sort of like the theory of multiple universes, there's sort of different versions of this film that I think could have been compelling in their own ways, which is probably obvious. But the one that I'll mention is we kind of stumbled into a warehouse in Portland where our producer Rebecca Taylor did. Where folks were processing sea urchins, and it was just a room filled with, I don't know, 30 or 40 people who were packing what do you call it, uni, into, you know, little sort of sushi trays, and divers were pulling up in their pickup trucks and unloading, you know, hurriedly unloading fresh crates of sea urchins that were then packed up very quickly and sent off on trucks to Boston, the ones that weren't being processed. And it was just a wonderful, at least I don't think that's in the, I don't think that's in the film. we just loved being flies on the wall there, and seeing that process didn't end up fitting in the flow of the film, but it was it's good to have reminders of how much you don't know and how much you don't see, and the lives of the people doing that work that I knew nothing about, and because of our schedule, we had to be gone before I could hear their stories. And that's always a bit of the heartbreak of working on a film. I think you sometimes are tempted to say, no, stop everything else. Let's just stay here for the next year and get to know these people. So any film is only going to ever be a tiny slice of a space, of a coast, kind of invitation into a space, an invitation to learn more. So.
Your poems are beautiful. That's so great to know that you are the author of them. Let's see. So here's another question, a little bit connected to what Ian was just talking about learning about people that you know little about. The film depicted and interviewed at least one what we think are perhaps new immigrants working in the seafood industry. And can you all comment on the role of immigrants in Maine's seafood industry? Any ones of you?
I'll try, but I would just say Maine's, I think we're still the whitest state in the union, so we don't have a very large immigrant population, but we've heard anecdotally that those who come into that space, they get treated fairly, and there's equal wages, equal all the great things that you would want in that space. But it is there is still a process taking place within Maine to try and bring everybody to the table in an equal way. And so we don't have a lot of minorities or immigrant populations on the water in our state. And it was really revealing. Our organization started this project this winter in response to COVID, where we were donating seafood into food insecure populations in Maine. And a lot of those populations were immigrant communities. And when we started talking to them about this opportunity, they're like, oh, bring us whole fish, or like, we have a great tradition in fish, like bring us your weird stuff, bring us different things. And it really got us thinking about that opportunity of, how do we bring new people into this space that traditionally has been a very white male, coast and fishery. And so, I think that there's some baby steps that are being taken right now. And, people like, Krista is leading the way and being a fantastic advocate as well. But we need to do a little bit better job of opening up those arms. There's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of need, but it's a slow process right now along the coast of Maine, especially because of where a lot of the communities are kind of situated more in inland locations. So.
I was also really struck by the film and the percentage of people featured who are women. That really struck me. And I would love to hear from Krista and any one of you. Krista, how unique are you anymore these days to be a woman in the fishery? It seems like it's changing, and it's changing pretty fast.
It is. There's still about 8% of the lobstering industry that are lobster women as captains, but I've seen a huge increase in stern women that have started working on the water on lobster boats. I have women that help me on my oyster farm, which is great to see. So it's really, really cool. When I was a kid, you never ever saw a woman on the back of a lobster boat. And now you see at least one or two in like every town, I'd say, or every harbor at least.
Nice.
And I would just add, there's a lot of very young women that are, getting ready, like high school age women who see this as a fantastic way to like stay in Maine. And we are always having that conversation about how do we keep young people in Maine. And it's been pretty amazing just to see how many young high school age women are saying like, I think I could be a fisherman. I think I could work on a lobster boat and start putting traps in the water. And even if they don't have a connection directly to the industry, there's folks that are doing it. It's really pretty amazing and inspiring.
Yeah, it's really, really great to see. I have a couple of women that bring their kids out on the farm with me, and I'm always teaching them about aquaculture, and they're really interested to learn. I'm always very hard on them about trash in the water. They have to pick up after themselves, and it's just really cool. Last summer, I took my Stern Woman's kids out on the boat as well, and they just absolutely loved it. And yeah, it's really, really cool to see women getting involved and also kids getting involved and really loving it. I really, really love that.
I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, unfortunately, but the Island Institute ran an aquaculture business development program for 4 years. And we had a high percentage of women in our program, including Krista. I want to say it was around 30 or 40% of the participants were women.
That's great. That's great. Okay, this next question, our time, by the way, is flying by. So this next question is totally different and has to do with sound. I'm pretty excited about this question. As a hard of hearing person, I was truly struck by the beautiful variety and depth of sounds in the film. The clammer's hand squishing in the muck, the salmon fillets clacking down the conveyor belt, the engine steaming away from the dock. With no central narrator, these audio clips seem to somehow weave all the stories together. Those of us who work on the water know those sounds well. Question for all the panelists: what sounds encapsulate the Maine coast for you? And for Ian, how did you make choices about the sounds you used in the film? So, what sounds encapsulate the coast of Maine?
For me, I live on the coast. Seagulls are probably the biggest ones. But on the fishing boat, it's my hauler, setting the traps back, them splashing in the water. The sound of people talking, I mean, because down here on the coast, voices carry. So it always sounds like a very active community down here, and I love it. There's always something going on. There's always people out and about, and always people stopping by and chit-chatting. So I'd have to name those for a few. As for the oyster farm, it is literally just peace and quiet. It is so quiet on the river. You barely hear anyone talking. It is just very peaceful.
That's great. Thank you, Krista. How about Brian?
I was just thinking it might actually be the absence of sound. I was thinking about camping out on an island offshore and how, at the end of the day, when the distant rumble of the diesel engines sort of faded into the background, you hear waves and you hear gulls, but it's really the absence of sound that I think, for me, is what makes the island so special in our coast. It's hard to find that in a lot of places.
I just want to give a shout out to this contraption we use to record a lot of the sound, which is this weird sort of head. It's a binaural microphone. So there's a microphone in this ear and in this ear. So it kind of captures what, a stereo rendering of a space, which gives this much more immersive feel. But anyway, you can imagine this thing, like us carrying this into a, lobster processing plant and trying to feel inconspicuous in the filmmaking process. But I appreciated the comment about the sound and wanted to give Pat, we call the head Pat, a shout out. So
I could really relate to the person who asked the question about when he mentioned the mud flat, and that opening scene. That was a really squishy mud flat. I mean, you could hear the suction. And my son, who just turned 5, loves mud flats, and so I can recognize that sound. Is this the type of mud flat where he is going to lose his shoe in, or is this the type of mud flat he's going to kind of stay on the surface. So I can relate to that sound very well.
The camera man lost his shoes.
Classic. Well, I think we have time for one more question. I'm really sorry to the folks whose questions we haven't gotten to, and I had a last question all planned, but I'm going to go with one of our questions that have come in from our audience because this is such a great question. And this is, I'd love to hear a comment from each one of you. So I'll say the question and you guys can decide who goes first. The film was deeply melancholic. And as someone who grew up here, it seemed to better represent Maine than a postcard documentary does. And I felt called to action. But what action? Who wants to start?
I will start, and this is off the cuff, not as planned, but I can relate to the melancholic theme. I also came away feeling compelled to take action, and that is my job at the Institute. But one thing that I don't address in my job was plastic pollution, and I saw a lot of it in the film. I see a lot of it when I go to the beach with my son, and I felt compelled to figure out how to make a difference there. So I came up with a few resources that I wasn't aware of. I won't list them off right here, but there are things that we can do to reduce, recycle, and come up with other ways, including bioplastics made from even seaweeds, for instance. So that was something that I would like to take action on a personal note.
Thank you, Susie.
Yeah, I would like to second that actually. And anyone that's traveling to the area here in Maine, there are places that you can look up to, jump on a boat and go to an island and help in like an island cleanup. Our family does it annually and helps out in that area. Another thing that you could do if you're traveling to Maine or you live here in Maine is support your local farmer or lobsterman or woman. You can find us online on Google, or we're very easy to find. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm always happy to help out a neighbor or tourist in our area.
And Krista, what's your Facebook or your website?
Can people still hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Oh, okay. I like the screen changed. I'm sorry.
I just noticed that too.
So you can follow me on Facebook, Aphrodite Oysters Maine, Krista Tripp Maine, or on Instagram at Krista Tripp, or it's actually Aphrodite _oysters. Just I tell people to look for the purple heart oyster, and yeah, I'm always here to lend out a helping hand with lobsters or oysters or anything else that I can help with.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Anyone else have a call to action reflection?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll sort of echo the marine debris and the plastic stuff. I'm glad to hear that came up. But sort of a different take is this film really taught me to slow down and listen and get to know my neighbors on the coast. I don't think I'll ever look at a hair salon again and not think of Pat Bryant, who goes out and fishes for eels in the morning and then goes and cuts hair. It's just amazing. The people that work on the coast are really, really special, and we should all take time to get to know them. And if we have sort of perceptions in our mind, to think about challenging those perceptions. That'd be mine.
Yeah, I guess I'll actually, I'm going to push back a little bit on the question, because I didn't feel melancholic. I felt inspired, and I felt optimistic. And that might just be because I'm usually a glass half full kind of guy, and I look at these things as fantastic opportunities for our coast. But I saw a lot of hardworking people who were doing amazing work and accomplishing amazing things. And so I think that somebody put it in the chat, but like, support your local producers, eat local seafood, support these great organizations who are doing the important work on the coast to get the voices heard, support the people who are working on the water. And, you know, like, these organizations were all founded by people and fishermen and activists who cared deeply about this way of life in this place. And I'm always inspired by the fishermen who we get to work with every day, who work their asses off on the water and then come home and go and sit in policy meetings or scientific meetings or go and talk to Susie about climate change. And like, they are working double lives or triple lives, and then they still have time to raise families and do everything else that goes along with it. And so, you know, my call to action is give a damn, make good choices, and like, get involved in all the great work that's going on our coast. And don't just let it pass by, because things are changing. Like we talked about at the beginning, things are changing. And if we let them change without us holding on to the tiller and driving this boat, like, it's gonna change in a way that we might not want. And we have an opportunity with all of us here coming together to say, like, we're gonna make sure that there's a place that's rocky and salty and working forever in Maine. And these are the organizations that are doing that great work. So thank you for bringing us all together, Maine Island Trails, and Ian for this fantastic film. It was really, really inspiring, and just it's something that, you know, I'm really proud that we're able to show off to so many people.
Thank you, Ben. I also wanted to wind us down by thanking Ian and your team for making this incredible film. I think I speak for the entire audience when I say it really hit the mark, and it spoke to us right in our hearts. Do you have any closing comments you wanted to share with us as the artist behind the film?
Oh, everyone said it so well. I think my only take action here is accept the challenge to see the world from new perspectives, and take the time to do it. And our website, if you want to learn more about the movie, is The Long Coast. .me. I was about to say it wrong, but there it is on the page. So thanks so much for hosting this, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you, Brian and Krista and Ben and Susie and the behind the scenes folks who have helped moderate this whole session from the Island Institute, the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, and the Maine Island Trail Association. And we look forward to connecting with you all out on the water. I think we are done. Thank you, everyone.